Right, afternoon everybody. Welcome to the second Bristol Connects live event. I'm Kim Slim. I'm a civil servant at MHCLG. I won't give away too much about what I do. I'll save that for the bit of the event where I actually talk about my career. This online series will provide you with the sort of career insights from fellow graduates and give you the opportunity to ask any questions, which could help you further or change your current career. So today's event is focusing on careers within government and the third sector, and Annabelle Pemberton and Shalini Vora and I are here to provide you with some career insights and to answer your questions. So I'll just start with a bit of housekeeping. You can use the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen throughout the talk to ask us any questions, and we'll get to those at the end of all our presentations. We'll cover as many questions as we can during our allotted time, but if we run out of time, then please do email your questions to alumni-events@bristol.ac.uk. I will endeavour to answer any remaining questions via email. Please only use the Q&A tab to ask any questions. Comments or technical issues should be emailed to that same email address, and the chat function has been disabled for this event. So Annabelle, Shailini and I are volunteering today, so the views and opinions that we share today are just our own and they don't represent our organisations or the university. Joining us today as well is Gareth Hughes, who is the University of Bristol Graduate Careers Consultant. He'll also be answering any careers related questions during the session, so if you have any questions for him, please do submit them on the Q&A tab. Just to let you know, the session is being recorded and you will receive an email link to the recording after the presentation, and subtitles will be added for guests who are hard of hearing after the event. If you have any technical issues during the presentation, please try exiting the Zoom meeting and then re-entering, and if you continue to experience any problems, then please do email alumni-events@bristol.ac.uk. So let's kick off then. So as I said earlier, my name's Kim Slim. I am a civil servant in the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So I'll start off saying a bit about how I sort of got to where I am now, starting all the way back from when I was in Bristol. So I graduated from Bristol in 2016. I was a law student from 2013 to 2016, and felt quite isolated in the fact that I wasn't somebody who immediately felt like I wanted to go into a legal career. So I was a bit confused for my entire 3 years at Bristol as to what I wanted to go into. So as most people do who are interested in working in government, I applied for the civil service fast stream in my final year, failed to get through even the first stage. So pretty much gave up on working in government and looked for other sort of career routes. Weirdly, I sort of ran the Burst radio station. Some of you might be familiar with it. So I was looking for opportunities in radio and in media. I also explored sort of teaching English as a foreign language abroad. And then a friend of mine sent me a job advert on a jobs portal called Civil Service Jobs. So I'd never heard of this jobs portal before. So I had a look at what was available and just sent a load of sort of standard generic applications, trying to hedge my bets. Only got one interview and landed a job after graduation as a PA in the Department for Education. And I remember the day I started, 4th of July 2016. Started just after the EU referendum result in 2016, and I bumped into Nigel Farage on his way to resign from UKIP, which wasn't foreboding, but luckily was just about the most exciting thing that happened for quite a while in that role. So the first job I had wasn't particularly exciting. I was an assistant to a senior civil servant in the DfE, but the exposure to that organisation, to the department, and the weird and confusing world of government was, just absolutely couldn't be matched. The exposure I got very, very quickly was incredibly helpful. You had to get to grips really, really fast with how the civil service worked, with how your specific department worked, how different departments work with and occasionally against each other, and you had to gain the trust of a lot of people very, very, very quickly. So myself, I'm not sort of naturally inclined to networking. It's not my forte, I'd say, but I sort of put myself out there because after 6 months of working as a PA, I was keen for a new challenge. I wanted to do something different and it was stretching. So I sort of had a short stint covering for somebody while they were on holiday, as you often do, and landed my next job as private secretary to the Children's Minister. So for any of you who don't know, each government department has a set of junior ministers who are sort of led by the Secretary of State, who sits at Cabinet, and each of those junior ministers are responsible for their own policy areas, and each minister gets a small office of about 4 staff who sort of work directly to him, channeling policy advice from other officials, accompanying him on meetings and visits, etc. So at the time, I was responsible for a range of different policy areas, including school sports, school food, healthy living for children, sex and relationships education at a really pivotal time when we were sort of moving towards a new bit of legislation that would change the way we were teaching sex education in this country. Things like period poverty as well, which was an absolutely fascinating policy to work on. Obviously, at the time, government wasn't exactly doing the right thing in that space, and we are now in a space where we're moving towards actually doing good things in that. Unfortunately, the PM then called an election in spring 2017. So had a long period of election preparation, which meant as civil servants, we weren't actually doing any real work because all that work is suspended. You're preparing for post elections. My minister unfortunately then lost his seat as an MP. So we were presented with a new children's minister, and I was then given a brand new portfolio of policy areas to deal with. And those policy areas came at a really difficult time for the government. And shortly after the election, the fire at Grenfell Tower happened. And I was absolutely enraged by what happened. And Grenfell Tower actually is in my borough. And I remember the morning after Grenfell, going out onto my sort of where the lift is in my flat and looking outside and seeing this plume of smoke coming across the city. Now, absolutely enraged by what had happened, I very, very much felt like I wanted to do what I can and help. So I moved on to secondment to what is now the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, just about 5 months after the fire, initially to work on rehousing policy for the survivors of the fire. So I've now spent just about 2.5 years now working on Grenfell. So most recently I've been leading the team which works directly with the bereaved and the survivors to sort of resolve their issues, working across the local council, other government departments and the NHS to sort of ensure survivors and victims are able to recover from the fire, whether that means securing visas for their relatives so they can come from abroad and take part in the public inquiry, or working closely with a housing association or another London council to ensure a former Grenfell resident could move on the same tenancy terms they had in the tower, or lobbying the local council to install motorised blinds at significant cost for a disabled survivor in their new home. So, but with all but a small number of survivors now in their new permanent home, I sort of did myself out of a job. So I now head up the sort of community support team, which works to ensure the council and the NHS are providing the necessary practical and health support to the bereaved and survivors, as well as ensuring that work across government that's relevant to Grenfell, so building safety, fire safety, immigration policy for bereaved relatives, and access to justice through the inquiry, is properly coordinated and properly aligned between departments. I also happen to be the Chief of Staff to Nick Hurd, who was previously an MP and the Victims Minister, and was appointed earlier this year by the Prime Minister as his sort of independent advisor on Grenfell. That was sort of slightly interrupted by a short stint, which I'm now in my last week of, working as part of what's called the National Shielding Service Programme, which is part of the government's response to the coronavirus pandemic. And the shielding programme is essentially our programme making sure that all the people who are clinically extremely vulnerable can get sort of the food support, the social contact support, and the deliveries of medications to their home, so they don't have to leave their homes and don't put themselves unnecessarily at risk of coronavirus. So I'm now coming to the end of that. I'll be returning to my old job next week, which will be exciting. I suppose what I will close with is sort of not many civil service jobs produce the kind of visible outcomes in people's lives as the ones that I've been doing. So in the time I spent working on Grenfell and on coronavirus, I've seen sort of those affected survivors and people who have been shielding on a very long journey towards recovery. And obviously many people are still on that journey. And I've been so privileged to play a role in sort of helping people get the home they need, or ensure they have the family support they're looking for, or they get whatever practical support they're after. So that's really been a huge privilege. I'm going to stop there because I've been talking for a very, very long time. So I'm going to introduce Annabelle Pemberton, who is an Organisational Development Officer at Redearth Education. Annabelle, over to you.
Hi everyone, so yeah, I'm Annabelle and I graduated Bristol in 2018 with a degree in history. So I guess I'll just talk a bit about my career journey. So during my time at Bristol, I worked quite a lot for the university in different roles, like a peer mentor, a peer assisted study session leader. I worked on different events and also as part of the Teddy campaign. And I also worked across a couple of years for the National Citizenship Service, which is an NGO local to the UK, as a team leader. And I definitely think kind of that all of those experiences helped me kind of build my career to get to where I am today. So my career, the focus I've kind of taken is in international development and programs specifically. So my first role since I left the university was with Restless Development as a peer leader and youth reporter. So I went and worked in Uganda for a few months with that charity. I was in a local village kind of running programs in schools and youth groups. I was working with a local health centre. I was also doing a few events, and then also kind of the more boring side of things like finance and budgeting and monitoring evaluation. But yeah, that was an amazing experience. And I was also on the side doing kind of blogging and reporting for them. Yeah, and that was part of the International Citizen Service, which is available to everyone, and I definitely recommend. So yeah, then after that, I got back, applied for a few different roles, and decided to go do an internship in London with Muslim Aid. So my role there was international programs intern, with my focus being on the Middle East. They kind of do programs in quite a few different areas: Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and other places. But yeah, my focus was on the Middle East, and that gave me some really kind of invaluable experience that was more office based. Obviously, I did do kind of more boring stuff like filing and admin, but again, I think that was really good in building up my skills. But I also got to work throughout the stages of project cycles and project implementation, like project reporting, project proposals, and also I got to be in contact with project and program offices and partners, which was amazing. So yeah, then after that, I got my first proper paid role with another religious-based charity, World Jewish Relief. And yeah, as I kind of said, my focus has always kind of been on programs and implementing them. And with World Jewish Relief, I was international programs administrator. So as part of that, I was kind of, as kind of is in the title, doing some admin stuff, such as making sure that the programs got the right amount of finances and also monitoring the valuation. But I also got to work kind of across their programs. It was a smaller charity, so yeah, I got to work across their programs, which included humanitarian ones, livelihood ones, and also ones for older people. And that was kind of amazing experience. But I kind of realised that I really wanted to be kind of back in country and directly working on the programs and kind of seeing the impact you were having, which is kind of the thing that I found the most enjoyable when I was in Uganda in the first place. So I applied for a few different roles, and I chose to go with the charity I'm working with now called Redearth Education. They're a much smaller charity. They have, they're registered in the UK and in Uganda, which is good kind of for funding applications and stuff. So at the beginning of this year, I went out and started working with them as an organisational development officer. And because they're such a small charity, it was really great. I kind of got to create more opportunities for myself and take as much responsibility as I kind of wanted. But yeah, I was training staff, kind of looking at their systems and reviewing and implementing new ones. And yeah, they also have a model nursery attached to them, so I was working in that for a bit, and also in the schools that they worked in. So yeah, unfortunately, because of coronavirus, I did have to come back early, but I'm still kind of doing some work for them from home and also managing their social media accounts. But their main kind of focus is, like I said in the name, education. They were set up by some amazing teachers I got to work with, and they basically train teachers in Uganda to provide a better level of education for students, mainly kind of in the area you work in, but also they do consultancies in other countries like South Africa, Zimbabwe, and people also come to see the model nursery as kind of an example of best practice and to learn from that. And I guess kind of the reason I chose to kind of work in the charity sector, and specifically international development, was, I guess, I just kind of figured I wanted to have a meaningful career and something that I really enjoyed doing. If I was going to have to do it for, I'd say, the next 40 or 50 years of my life, I kind of wanted it to be about more than just the money. And yeah, I got to work with some amazing projects, which I have. So yeah, that's pretty much my career journey up to now. I'll hand it back to Kim.
Thanks very much, Annabelle. Really, really great to hear all that. I'll now introduce Shalini Vora, who is the Trust Fundraising Officer at St Mungo's, and I'd encourage you all to keep submitting your questions and answers on the Q&A page, and we'll answer them after Shalini's talk. Shalini, over to you.
Thanks, Kim, and thanks, Annabelle. So hi, everyone. I'm Shailini, and I currently work in the fundraising team at St Mungo's as a Trust Fundraising Officer. So like Kim, I graduated from Bristol in 2016. And I graduated with a degree in geography with a year abroad in Spain, best year of my life. And when I was graduating, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like similar to Annabelle, I knew that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to have a career that meant something, but I was just really passionate about so many different things. So like anti-racism, feminism, the environment, and I just didn't know where to start. I didn't really know anything about the sector either. I had no contacts. So I went to a social enterprise conference in my last year of uni, and it was organised by the University of Bristol just to see if I could network, get in there. And it actually worked. I made a connection with an organisation called No More Taboo, and they were working on dismantling the stigma around menstruation across the world. And so amazingly, I was also starting to write my dissertation about period poverty. So about how people who menstruate, if they're sleeping rough, how they navigate their periods while in this situation. And so this really resonated with them. I started volunteering with them for the whole of my final year. And at the end, when I graduated, we managed to secure a grant from the University of Bristol Internship scheme, so they could pay me. Great, thanks Uni of Bristol. And so what I did with them was I was working on furthering my research that I'd already done with my dissertation. And building on that research, we worked to build a project in the Bristol community to support people who menstruate in this situation. And that was really amazing because working for such a small organisation, as Annabelle said, you get to learn so many different things. And it really kind of embedded me into the Bristol charity sector because we had to work with so many different organisations. And that's definitely helped me, as you will find out later. While I was working in Bristol as well, I worked for the Bristol Pounds, you know, that local currency that we have. And I worked as a corporate partnerships assistant. So that was really good in building my kind of relationship skills. And that was also paid for by the Bristol internship scheme. So definitely look into that because Bristol paid my whole year. But basically, my salary ran out. And as you all know, it's quite difficult to get a job in the charity sector. So I was lucky enough to have grandparents who lived in London. So I could go and live with them and start volunteering in some London-based organisations. So I started volunteering at the charity called Only Connect, and they're a creative criminal justice charity that support people leaving prisons. And I was working with them as a research assistant, so just evaluating the latest research of how we could holistically support people. Because obviously we think about employment, we think about housing, and that's all really important, but that's not going to be successful if we're not supporting people with their kind of spiritual side, or if they're feeling happy, their mental health. So that was really amazing. And at the same time, because I wanted to just get things done, I worked for Womankind Worldwide, and they're an international women's rights charity. So it was a really good insight into the kind of international development sector. I worked there as a policy assistant, so I saw how charities could work with and influence government. And yeah, all of that was really, really great experience. But after all of those roles and all of that experience that I'd gained, I still couldn't get a job, a full-time paid role, even though while I was working for all of those jobs, I was applying for paid roles at the same time. Nothing, like a couple of interviews, but then you get ghosted. So I was really anxious. I didn't know what to do. Like I had no money. So I chucked it all in and I went to go live in Madrid for a year. And then I came back feeling a lot more motivated and rejuvenated and like definitely more mature as well. So I really needed that break for myself, and I would encourage anyone who needs to take a break just to do it because it really helps. So when I got back, from Madrid. I applied for an entry-level role at St Mungo's and I got it. And I've been there nearly for 2 years. And it's it's an amazing organization to work for. After 8 months, I moved teams and I moved upwards as well, which was so great. I started in the legacy fundraising team, and now I'm in trusts and grants. So I'm going to tell you a bit about St Mungo's. So St Mungo's is definitely by far the largest organization I've worked for. I think before that, I worked for Womankind Worldwide and there was about 20 people, and St Mungo's has about 1,500 people who work for them. So it was definitely a big culture shock when I started there. And we're one of England's leading homelessness charities. So we operate all across the south of England and the Midlands, and support about 30,000 people a year. And recently it's been really amazing because we've been supporting people off the streets in the context of the current pandemic to make sure that they can self-isolate in safety. So what I do, so I'm in the Trusts and Grants team. So every day I'm writing applications and reports to different grant funders and trust funders. And it is a really inspiring role, even though I'm not out there. I'm in an office, I'm right now at home. I get to research and advocate for the often very complex issues that people experiencing homelessness face. And I get to talk about the different aspects of our work. So the great thing about working for such a large organization is that it encompasses so many different things. So one day I might be writing about outreach services and what we're doing on the streets, and another day I'll be writing about mental health services or immigration services. So it's a really, really varied role. And even though it is such a large organization, they really encourage us to volunteer for different teams and see what's going on, so we get a really good grasp of the different aspects of the organization. And it's always great if you're not very happy in your current role, you just kind of want to shift. Just getting that insight is fab. So yeah, it has really opened up my eyes to how many opportunities there are in the charity sector. So for me, when I started out, I was like, okay, there's fundraising, there's policy, there's programs, like, okay, I've got these 3 things to choose from. But after working at St Mungo's, I can see there are amazing people who are running our hostels, who are working in our hostels, who are mental health specialists, who are immigration specialists, and people who are also working in HR and IT and finance. We need those people. And so for whatever your skill set is, I'm sure you can find a role in the charity sector. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to hand it back to Kim and we can start answering questions.
Thanks, Shailini. Honestly, 2 very, very inspiring journeys to have had. So, those who are attending, please do continue submitting some questions to the Q&A tab just at the bottom of your screen. We have got a couple that have been submitted in advance. So, first one: how have you found career progression in your respective fields? I think we can probably all say a bit about this. Shailini, you touched on this in your talk just now. Is any more you want to add on this one?
Yeah, definitely. I'll just add something quickly. So from working in smaller charities, and you guys can talk about your experiences as well, I found that it is more difficult to progress within the same charity. And I saw, even though I was a volunteer, I saw people having to move to be able to move upwards, because often there's only 1 or 2 people in that same team, or there's just 1 person in that job role. So unless they go on maternity leave or leave, you can't move up. Whereas at St Mungo's, it's actually been really easy. Like, people move around all the time because it is such a big organization. There are more spaces in teams. It's more structured in the way that, so I'm constantly working with my manager to get to my personal career goals. And we're always thinking about how I could be moving up or kind of accessing the roles that I really like. So I would say in larger organizations it's easier, but I don't want to say don't work for small organizations because they're amazing too. Thanks.
Actually, Annabelle?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Shailini just said. And also, as you kind of touched on, it makes such a big difference to have a manager or even kind of someone as a mentor who wants to support you, giving you advice and who's kind of been where you are. When I was in my internship at Mercer Maid, my manager was kind of amazing at that. He had also done the International Citizen Service, so he kind of knew where I was coming from as well, and my sort of interests. I would say, as kind of we've all said, we've all kind of gone through not having a job or doing unpaid roles, and unless you get completely lucky, you will probably have to do that volunteering or internship or both. Pretty much everyone I know who works in this sector has had to do that. But for me, that's kind of really given me some amazing skills and experiences that I wouldn't have got to where I am now without those. So yeah, definitely, even if you kind of feel like you want a paid job, even just to fill the time between now and then, there's roles you can do online, especially at the moment, remote roles. And yeah, don't be afraid to kind of ask someone for advice and to look for jobs outside of your company if it is slightly smaller.
Thanks, Annabelle. I'd absolutely echo that, both your comments about sort of mentoring and sort of particularly at our age, if you're somebody who's fresh out of university, it's really, really important to be able to find someone who can help you navigate around what is quite a complex industry, but both the third sector and government. So for my part, I wasn't a fast streamer, so the majority of people I was working with weren't graduates. So I really had to put myself out to try and find people who could help me navigate around the civil service, what sort of routes of progression. Not to toot my own horn, I mean, I wasn't on the fast stream, but I finished what would have been the fast stream early, because the fast stream gets you from 1 grade to 3 grades up in like 4 years in my day. And in just under 3 years, I've basically just done that myself. But that I wouldn't be able to do that without the help of mentors and a bunch of really, really helpful colleagues who have helped me navigate around what's quite a tricky sector to progress in. Right, moving on to some more questions. So another one that was previously submitted. Do you have any advice on how to advance from a volunteering role into a professional career in the third sector? I think Annabelle, Shalini, this but both for you. Again, you touched on them in both your talks. Anything either of you want to add? Annabelle, should we start with you?
I would say kind of just don't give up. I also, as Shalini said, had kind of a lot of interviews, a lot of applications I never heard back from, interviews that I didn't get. But yeah, I kept trying. I also, alongside the internship, was doing volunteering remotely. And yeah, you kind of just don't give up, basically. Even if you can't find a role, you can kind of again, as we said, find a mentor, or if the charity isn't necessarily advertising a role, you could maybe contact them and volunteer for them, and then that could progress. But yeah, definitely just don't give up is the most important thing, because there were so many times where I thought, it's not going to happen for me, and if I'd given up, then it wouldn't have. Yeah, just persevere, and whilst you're maybe in the gap between a paid role and volunteering, just try and skill yourself up as much as possible, even if it's not with maybe the volunteering, the organisation you're volunteering with, or internship scheme. There's loads of really good websites, for example, Disaster Ready, I've used quite a lot, that really kind of has helped improve my skills and knowledge of the sector. So make sure you're kind of educating yourself to help when you do eventually kind of get those interviews and hopefully that paid role.
Thanks, Annabelle. Shalini?
Yeah, amazing advice there from Annabelle. Do all of those. I would also say definitely link in with recruiters, like charity people, because it's their job to get you a job. So that's been really useful for me. I got my job at St Mungo's through a recruiter. Again, with Annabelle, just keep talking to people in the sector, keep finding out different opportunities. They're not always organised. I know that networking is quite hard right now because we're all stuck at home, but what I did, don't know if it's a bit creepy, but I found people on LinkedIn with my dream job, and then I messaged them being like, hi, do you want a cup of coffee? How do I get into this? And then you kind of work back from there. I also want to say, just on a different vein, I know that it's really important to keep gathering skills, and I understand that for lots of us, we can't volunteer because we don't have the privilege to not pay rent. And I think that it is really important, just if you just get a job in anything, you're still building really amazing skills. So when I was in Madrid, I worked in a call center, but that really built my skills when I'm talking on the phone, and it built my confidence. And so when I came back to St Mungo's, I just smashed the interview because I had to speak for a year. So even if you are doing something right now to survive and it's not exactly in the charity setting, keep your finger on the pulse. So make sure you're having those conversations, make sure you're volunteering on the weekends or in the evenings, but everything you're doing is really valid.
Absolutely agree with that. And also, Shalini, that LinkedIn stalk thing, not creepy. I do that too. It's honestly a really effective way of sort of finding the people who are doing the jobs that you never thought existed, and you realise actually this is something I quite like to do, because you eventually have to move on from that job. So I quite like to take your place one day. So there's quite a few questions around sort of routes into government that are but also aren't the civil service fast stream, so I might just sort of bundle them all into one. So one question was how can you get into government without using the fast stream? So the route that I took, which I described earlier, which is essentially just going on, I think it's, I can never remember what the website is, but if you just Google civil service jobs, there is a sort of job search portal there where you can divvy up by department, by location. The civil service hires across the country, and obviously in these times you can do the jobs from anywhere. I've been working from home for 4 months, like most people in the UK. So very, very, very flexible. The thing that I suppose, and some people have asked this on the Q&A, the thing that is quite tricky to navigate sometimes is the grade system within the civil service and what is entry level. I think one of the questions that's been asked is what is an entry level position within the civil service. So usually those are marked as what's called executive officer or higher executive officer, and that often depends on your sort of experience. I came in as an executive officer, or an EO as they're often referred to. I have colleagues who came in as grads with particular experience who came in as HEOs. That is usually the sort of the two levels which are sort of entry level, so to speak. But every job opening in the civil service has a point of contact that I would highly recommend emailing and just explaining your circumstances and saying, I'm really interested in this job, sounds like a really interesting opportunity, here's my experience, is this something you'd recommend I'd be able to apply for? There's absolutely no harm in doing that. In fact, we prefer to hear from people who are interested, because it means if it's not right for you, you don't waste your time writing a sort of full application. But equally, it also means if you are really interested, you get to hear a bit more about the role, and that will help you sort of make sure you sort of tailor your application to those who are who will be reading your application at the other end. The fast stream specifically, though, I can talk a bit about, even though I wasn't a fast streamer, because ironically I'm an assessor for the fast stream. So I'm one of those people you'll see at the fast stream assessment centre with a little notepad and an iPad, writing down sort of every word you say and then marking you later. Although we're doing those all virtually now. But the fast stream obviously is highly competitive. I think one of the questions that was asked was, is how competitive is the civil service fast stream? Fairly competitive. I mean, my understanding is I don't know the numbers, but it is the most sought after grad program in the country. It's also the biggest. We have the biggest intake of any, I think, grad scheme in the UK. So it is really competitive, and most people don't get in on their first try. I'm going to be frank and be honest here. But somebody's got to get in the first time round, so don't let that detract you from going for it. The fast stream, of course, is a really different kind of like job. It's a grad scheme, so you go on a number of placements, each a year long, lasting 3 years. It's designed to get you from one grade so from HEO to grade 7 in 3 years, and it's designed to basically build up your skills in leadership and policy making. And there's lots of different disciplines within the fast stream that you sort of apply for. The diplomatic service fast stream, as in the Foreign Office one, being obviously the most popular of all the different streams to apply for. In terms of sort of insights and tips, I'd only recommend one thing, and that is reading something called our success profiles. So if you just Google civil service success profiles, that's the way in which we assess everything, both for the fast stream but also for entry-level jobs, normal jobs in the civil service. Really understanding that inside out at the grades which you need to apply for will hugely benefit you in applying. Equally, if you've got contacts within the civil service, they'll be really helpful in terms of explaining to you the sort of things we're looking for. There's no hard and fast rule. Every job is different. But for the most part, it's worth bearing in mind the fast stream is really competitive, but it's by no means the only way to get into the civil service. And you have to wait a year between applications. So that is a year where you have to basically find yourself something to do before you can apply for the next round. And I'll very quickly answer this other question about how old I was when I got my first PA job. I was 21, which feels like a really long time ago. So one really interesting question here. Are there any internship positions in government or the third sector in this uncertain time? I'm going to turn to Annabelle and Shailini to see if are there any internship positions going in your organisations or any other that you know about?
There isn't any in mine because we are a very small organisation, but I still get notifications from Charity Job, I think, for kind of volunteer roles. And yeah, I don't know if they're necessarily internships, some are, some aren't, but there's some really amazing opportunities at the moment still for either remote or, well, the majority of them are remote at the moment, to work on international programs as well, but also local based programs. And yeah, what I would say is don't kind of restrict yourself to, for example, obviously I work in programs and in an international setting, which is what I wanted, but when I was getting into the sector, I was willing to kind of work for national organisations or in kind of other roles within the sector to build up experience. So if the internship or volunteer role isn't exactly what you want, it's still worth applying for, because as we've kind of already said, it will kind of build up your skills and also your contacts to get you to a place that will eventually hopefully help you get the sort of role that you want. So yeah, that's the advice I'd give on that.
Shailini?
Thanks. So at St Mungo's, we don't have any internship roles, but as I mentioned before, we've been at the forefront of the COVID-19 response. So we are really, really busy right now. So there are loads and loads of volunteering opportunities. If you go on the website, we're also hiring. So yeah, definitely just have a look at on the website to see if there's anything that interests you. I know that, how many people? I know like definitely a handful of people that I know who work at St Mungo's started off as volunteers as well. So if you feel a bit stressed, you feel like there's not a job there that you like, but a volunteering role, that it could always turn into a fully paid role. And echoing Annabelle, yeah, I think it's really important that once you get your foot in the door and you start meeting people and start understanding kind of like the jargon and the terminology and how things work, it's easier to move around. So if there is kind of an entry-level job that you don't really love, but it's for a charity that is doing work that you love, then definitely just go for it, because I'm sure there'll be scope to move around and it'll be an incredible experience.
I'd echo that hugely. I mean, my first job as a PA, that was my foot in the door. You know, I sort of suffered through bringing coffee to my director every day. You know, in order to find the job I wanted to do, and I didn't know what I wanted to do until I sort of got that exposure. So, definitely would recommend that. So for my part, we used to run, the civil service used to run 2 really big internships every summer. So there's the summer diversity internship program and the, I want to say early something, I can't remember what the D stands for. It's called the EDIP, but the early something internship program. I'm really sorry, I can't remember what it stands for. It's obviously quite uncertain times at the moment, and recruitment is quite tricky across the civil service, including into these normal streams. So I can't say with certainty whether they're running this year or not. But what I can say is, as Annabelle and Shailini both said, the civil service is still hiring, and I will just flag that there is a massive recruitment drive for about 320 higher executive officers. So this is an entry-level job that is available. There's a range of tests and application processes you have to go through to do it, but that is available on the Civil Service Jobs programme across government departments, and that's a big recruitment drive we're doing now at the moment, obviously in the run-up to preparing for well, to make sure we're ready for whatever COVID-19 throws at us in the next couple of months. So I would highly recommend looking at that. Another really interesting question as well. Looking at your peers and colleagues in your respective organisations, would you say that a master's would be useful? Very, really good question. I work with a lot of people who have master's degrees and use them extensively in their jobs. Many of my colleagues who work in the Department for International Development, which is now merging with the Foreign Office, for example, have specialist degrees. Likewise, people who work in the Treasury as well, or some do have master's degrees. What I will say for my industry is that a master's is by no means necessary for pretty much any of the jobs in the civil service, and certainly not for any entry-level jobs. And while it can be an advantage when you're in the job, they don't necessarily count in your favour unless you can demonstrate some really practical experience that the Masters has brought you. But generally, a bachelor's degree is often enough, but even that is not really required as you know, as a civil servant. And I know there was a question earlier about having a 2-2 degree as an entry-level candidate in that sector. For the civil service, I can say that's 2-2 is the minimum. You having a 2-2 is not a barrier at all. I left university with a 2-2 degree in law, and I'm in the civil service, so sure that's not a barrier. But Shalini and Annabelle, I'll let you talk about your respective sectors as well.
Okay, so I do know quite a few people across the sector. Some have master's degrees, some don't. Some say it's helped them, some don't. But I definitely think it does help kind of your knowledge and stuff that I kind of had to learn on the job. And maybe I would have got a job sooner if I kind of had that knowledge already. But it's definitely by no means essential to getting a job. I don't have one, and I've worked for quite a few different companies. And as I said, you can kind of educate yourself and skill yourself up, keep up to date with stuff in the sector and current events. I'd also say it doesn't necessarily have to be a master's degree in, for example, international development. For some of the organisations I've worked in, the programmes might focus on a specific things such as livelihoods or economic development or health. So even if you've got kind of a degree that isn't directly related to the field in general, a lot of companies do look for people with maybe specialist knowledge in other aspects, which can really help you stand out. For example, the CEO of Redearth Relief had worked a lot in agriculture, and yeah, that was kind of his specialism. Another lady who worked in a livelihoods department had at first had a career in finance. So yeah, these skills are really kind of transferable if you kind of are worried about not having a master's degree or degree in the specific area that you want to work in.
Absolutely, thanks. Shalini.
Thanks, Annabelle. Yeah, I would echo what Annabelle said, especially when I was working for Womankind Worldwide. And when you're in the international development space, so many people have master's degrees. Like most of the people that I worked with at Womankind had a master's degree in gender studies because we were working on women's rights, also international development. And yeah, I also felt that it was a barrier for me to move into international development. But as Annabelle said, you can learn it on the job, which is amazing. Thinking about fundraising, which is kind of the space that I'm operating in now, you definitely don't need a master's degree. For me, I wanted to do a master's, but because I'm really indecisive, I just couldn't decide which one I wanted to do, so I just didn't. So I don't have a master's degree. Most of my team, I don't think, have master's degrees at all, because I think with fundraising, it's all about your communication skills. It's all about how you present yourself to funders. It's the way that you can express like your written communication, your oral communication. So I think when we're thinking about fundraising, yeah, it's more about kind of like your experience and what you've done and how you've demonstrated that you can influence people and interact well with people. So if you can demonstrate that, and that could be in any sector beforehand, then I think you'll do really well in a fundraising role. Do I have anything else to say? Yeah, I think when I'm thinking about the homelessness sector as well, again, it just depends on what you want to do, because I've mentioned before, I mean, we work a lot with supporting people with their mental health or with their immigration status. And so obviously some specialist knowledge is needed for those kind of roles. But I think, I mean, going back to what I said about LinkedIn, is that if you kind of see the path that you want to do and you find people who've done it, maybe go on to the education and see what they did to get there, and what kind of specialist knowledge you need. But for fundraising in general, you don't need a master's.
Great, thanks both. Some really good questions coming in from international students and about international students as well. So the first one is for you, Annabelle and Shailini. Is it possible for international students who are presently not in the country to apply for third sector roles? And is it easy to get sponsorship for third sector jobs for recent graduates?
It really depends. I haven't, I don't think, worked for anyone directly who's done that. I've worked with people who kind of have dual citizenship, but a lot of the roles that I have seen advertised as well, obviously depending on where you're from, are kind of based nationally. So I'd say it's always worth looking at those jobs within your own context as well, even if, say, you get a job in your own context and then that gives you experience to apply for a sponsored job in the UK. It definitely does happen, but I haven't worked directly with someone who it happens for. But don't let that kind of deter you. And as I said, there will always be kind of local causes for you to work on to help you maybe get to a point where you could work in the UK if you wanted to. And yeah, so look at those, and the same kind of advice for everyone else: build your skills up in the meantime, and that will definitely put you at an advantage.
Shailini?
Yeah, I can appreciate the frustration with this because, I mean, for people with British passports, it's so difficult to get paid jobs. So I can imagine there's kind of like an extra pressure with sponsorship. I can't speak about St. Mungo's because I was like scanning my brain for the people I work with. And even though I work for such a diverse organization, and there are people in my team from other countries, I think they do have dual citizenship, but it's always worth exploring. It's always worth applying. Especially to larger organizations who might have the funds, like St. Mungo's. And yeah, just keep going. Sorry, that's all I have. And I said, like Annabelle said as well, like when you're building your skills, you're building up ways of getting into the charity sector. So even if you can get another job that sponsors you to stay in the UK, because I appreciate people, I know, start relationships here or really like it here and don't want to move back home, then that can be a way of staying and building your skills before you find your perfect job in the charity sector.
So they're both very very comprehensive and helpful answers. There's a similar question as well about the government sector and intellectual property in particular. So do you know anything about this field or about intellectual property in the UK, or any advice to those who are foreigners who want to be civil servants in the UK? I can answer the latter. I probably can't answer the former. I'll put my hands up and say, despite having been a law student, I know nothing about intellectual property or how the IPO works in the UK, I'm afraid. But what I can give some advice on is if you are either an international student now or a recent grad having been an international student, or a foreigner working in the UK who doesn't hold a British passport, then that isn't a barrier for you working in the British civil service. But in some jobs, it can be a barrier. We have a number of jobs, particularly in sort of security and intelligence, which are referred to as reserved posts. Now, these are always flagged quite clearly on the job advert that this is a reserved post, and you will need to be a sole British citizen. So in my case, for example, there are actually a fair few jobs I can't apply for because I have 3 citizenships, because my parents are both from different countries and I'm from the UK. So there's actually quite a few jobs I'm barred from applying for myself, despite being a British citizen. But those are really quite clearly sort of marked there, and that's not a problem for the majority of jobs, provided you have the right experience and you'll be assessed in the same way. You wouldn't be at any disadvantage because you weren't British. But those questions will always be asked in the run-up, because in applying for these jobs, you need to be security cleared, and the vetting is quite thorough. So there are a fair few more questions you might have to answer if you're not a British passport holder than if you otherwise would be. But don't let that deter you. It should be quite easy to apply for. Having looked at some more of these questions, we've got 10 minutes to go. Are you aware of any opportunities in the sector available that require knowledge of Russian? Thanks for sharing your stories. So I can answer that one quite quickly. An obvious one, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, I'm sure would, at the very least, any language. There's skills you've learnt through your studying of a language that is applicable in a lot of other sectors and a lot of different sort of environments, rather than just actually knowing a language specifically. It also shows that you're able to learn a language. So if you wanted to do a job in a different country, as part of the the civil service or the foreign service, then you could, and it demonstrates you're able to. I don't personally know of any other jobs in my sector that would require knowledge of Russian, but like most degrees, it's not so much the substance of the knowledge of the degree that you've actually learned. It's a lot about the skills you've picked up that helps the most. So, but Shailini and Annabelle, I'll hand over to you if you've got any additions to make.
Yeah, actually, in my last role at World Jewish Relief, some of our programs were based in Eastern Europe and kind of Russia as well. So 3 members of the programs team actually spoke Russian, and they were used for translating and also talking to partners in countries. So there definitely is roles available within that charity if a role became available, or just within the sector in general, if you look at kind of where their programs are based. And that goes for any language as well. If you look at where the programs are based, if you do have a language skill, I've seen some jobs that say it's essential for some languages. I don't actually have, I'm learning Spanish at the moment, but I'm not fluent in any languages. I think that's definitely an advantage to work in a sector, even if it's not programs and something else. So yeah, that's definitely a skill that would make you stand out from everyone else.
Thanks, Annabelle.
Yeah, definitely. Like, going on from what both Kim and Annabelle have said, it's a really amazing skill to have another language. And I was just thinking, like, as well as international organizations, you could look for community groups that support ethnic minorities in the UK. And there might be some charities that are specifically supporting the Russian community that you could work for, or at least volunteer for. And yeah, so I was also thinking, I speak Spanish and I wanted to use my Spanish at work, which I don't in my day job, but St. Mungo's run a phone line called StreetLink, where you can ring up and let us know if you've seen somebody sleeping rough or you're worried about them. Also, people who are sleeping rough themselves ring up. There's always a need for different language speakers. So sometimes I'll just, back in the day when we were in the office, I'll be just working along and they'll be like, Shay, come, we've got someone on the phone that speaks Spanish. So I just run across. So yeah, if there are any kind of like places where they have phone lines where lots of different people are ringing in from across the country, I'm sure those language skills can come in use. I know that NSPCC also has a phone line that you can support on. So yeah, just lots of different ways you could be creative and think about where you could use your language.
Great, thanks both. So I've got two questions here about, I think these are for me, about aligning to the beliefs, or you find it easier to align to the beliefs of the government that you work for, or how do you navigate around working with people who have different political beliefs? I'll be honest, with difficulty sometimes. I think I've been in government through a fairly tricky time for our country and now for the world as well. And at times it's expected that people who work in the civil service might not necessarily agree with their political masters, but it's part and parcel of being a civil servant is you have to be impartial. And the demonstration of your work needs to be impartial as well. We're paid by taxpayers' money, so we represent in our work those who are elected. So it's difficult, but for the most part, particularly the jobs that I've done, I've been quite lucky in that I've been doing a lot of sort of humanitarian type jobs where I'm really seeing the sort of the fruits of the work that we're doing. But I can understand how for others who work in sort of slightly more contentious policy areas, it can be quite tricky to reconcile your beliefs. But it's a really core tenet of being a civil servant is you need to be comfortable with being impartial. And I've given lots of people career advice before where if they feel uncomfortable working in a space where they have to be impartial, then the civil service isn't really for them. So that's probably just one thing I'd take away from that. A couple more questions. I think we've got a little bit of time. What makes you most employable? Certain internships, degrees, or skills? Really good question. Slightly trickier answer. I suppose so we can probably take these personally. I think so for me, what's made me really employable has been the range of different things I've I've done in my career. But obviously we're talking to lots of people who are either recent grads or currently students. So when I was at university, a lot of the things that I did that built up different skills were the things that helped me most in sort of getting into my career. So ran the radio stations. There's bits of leadership there, management of other people, working with stakeholders. Trying to get money out of the SU, that sort of thing. Fundraising. So all those things were really, really helpful. The range of experiences I think was most helpful for me. Shalini?
Yeah, the same. I feel like I worked really, really, really hard to get a really amazing mark in my degree, but employers are looking at what experience you have and how well you can do the job, as opposed to a degree that's lots of amazing experiences, but also just a piece of paper at the end of the day. So I think that what Kim said, just engaging with what's going on at university, if you're in your final year and you have the headspace outside of your dissertation to volunteer for somewhere, then definitely do that. I think that, definitely the internships, and that could be like a formal internship or could literally just be volunteering. And I think that that's also really important, because I feel like when it's called an internship, there's everyone who's graduating is like, oh, I need to go apply for that. But if you just volunteer, it's probably a little bit easier to get into. And yeah, just lots and lots of passion about what you want to work for. So I nearly cried in my interview for St. Mungo's because I'm so passionate about supporting people experiencing homelessness. And if you can show that, then that really shines through. What about you, Annabelle?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you both said. And putting myself back in my position I was when I left university, I had kind of worked in quite a few different roles for the university, and as I said, the National Citizen Service, which I was working with young people as a team leader. So the combination of those skills, I would say, what maybe could have helped me even more was maybe being more literate in programs such as Excel, and that sort of thing, just like pivot tables. I had no idea what they were, and I asked about them in the interview once. So these things that aren't necessarily what you think of when you think of this job in the sector can really help you, and having that knowledge. But as I said, my first role was with Research Development and the International Citizen Service, which is open to everyone throughout the UK and is funded by the government, and all of your expenses are paid. So I definitely recommend kind of that sort of thing. And I think internships and as much experience and knowledge that you can show really helps your employability.
Absolutely. Thanks both. I think we've just about run out of time for more questions. I can see there are a couple that are still open, so we're going to circulate this recording afterwards, but if we didn't manage to cover your question, please email alumni, I'm going to make sure I get this email address right. I think it's alumni events@bristol.ac.uk, and we'll try and answer it by email. So just to remind you, the career service is obviously still here for you for up to 3 years after you finish your course, wherever you are in the world. And whether you know exactly what is it you want to do, or you're just getting started in trying to look out for your career, you can benefit from careers guidance, feedback on job applications, practice interviews, as well as access to the My Career portal. So through that, you can book onto career service events, you can look for job vacancies, and view hundreds of sort of online resources as well. And if you've completed an undergraduate degree at Bristol University in the last 12 months and live in the UK, you're also eligible for an enhanced Bristol grad support package, which will help you get your career started, including one-to-one career support from a dedicated careers consultant who specialises in helping recent graduates. So if you want to see more of that, log on to the My Career portal on the Career Service website to find out more and to contact them directly. So I suppose all that's left for me to say is thank you to Shalini and Annabelle for your time today. Thank you to the Career Service for organising this, and thanks to all of you for your time and for attending. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone.